right, so we're gonna go on into the reports. If we can start with our student reps, yay! Welcome tonight.
Okay. You don't have to. Okay, so this is our December presentation.
Yay!
So we're going to start off with school reports, starting with our elementary school. Parents of Super Spartans of the Month came to school to have lunch and celebrate with their children. The SES Parent Group Holiday Store opened, which gives students the opportunity to buy 5 gifts and then have them wrapped and ready to go. The last week in December, they'll be having Wacky Winter Spirit Days, student birthday lunches with Miss Philippi, as well as an all-school morning meeting before winter break.
And for the middle school, the Math Counts team had their first meet on December 6th, and they are excited for their upcoming season. They are preparing for a Genius Hour fair, which will take place this Friday, December 20th. And students had an opportunity to participate in a 3-on-3 basketball tournament during lunch in the gym.
All right, on to our high school. SHS recently completed their week-long ALICE training, where students learned the proper actions to take in the event that an armed intruder were to enter the building. All winter sports are now in session and have had successful starts to their seasons. And last Wednesday, SHS hosted another successful blood drive and had many participants.
Okay, and moving on to sports, for girls basketball, they are holding a current record of 3-on-3, and their next game is at Prescott this Thursday. Boys basketball is holding a record of 3-1, and they are hosting a home game tomorrow against Osceola. And for dance, we started our competition season, and our soloist finished 5th last Saturday, and ensemble finished 2nd. And our first team performance will be tomorrow at the boys basketball game. And for cheer, they're gearing up for the competition season and are having a great time cheering at basketball games as well as wrestling meets.
There's a picture of our dance team, some of our basketballers. More sports. So boys hockey are 2-5 right now with games on Tuesday and Thursday this week. Girls hockey are off to a great start with a record of 3-1 and have games on both Tuesday and Thursday this week. Wrestling, we have a very young team this year, which is awesome to see. Lots of freshmen and sophomores. With lots of good potential, they had a meet last Thursday and this Saturday and did very well with individual wins by Zach Machagine, Tyler Hansbarger, and Landon Ennis. Boys hockey. And that's Landon wrestling.
Okay, and moving on to activities. As they said, they held a successful concert last Monday in the SHS NPR, and they had a great time on their Disney trip with all their performing that they were able to do there. And for yearbook, they're working super hard on putting together a great yearbook for this year, and the photographers are being present at almost every home event that we have. So they're getting lots of great pictures for that. And they just finished their cover. And for robotics, they're looking forward to another successful year, and they're starting to work on their robots every day after school.
So here's a group at Disney a couple weeks ago. I think they were waiting for a ride. More fun pictures from Disney.
Looks warm there.
Yeah, right? Florida, the dream. So our special feature for tonight is multimedia class. So multimedia is a class that offers students both an elective credit and an English credit. We've had the opportunity to help with many cool projects this year, such as the schedule change video update that went out to parents and community members, the ALICE training video that was shown to the elementary schoolers to demonstrate a proper ALICE drill, the sportsmanship video at the beginning of every sporting event held in the Somerset Gym. This is in addition to creating weekly announcements that update our school on what's going on, that are shown every Friday afternoon. We've also made informational vlogs, original shows, and Christmas scenes for our Christmas special announcements. And you can check all this out on our YouTube channel, HS Spartans 300. It's all of our fun videos, so I highly encourage you to go check it out.
That is neat.
And that's all we have.
Thank you, guys. What is that YouTube channel again? Spartan 300?
HS Spartan 300, I think. Should be. It might be Spartan 300 HS.
Okay, just HS, okay. Thank you, guys. It's always great to see those pictures and to hear how all the events are going. Did anyone have anything to add that we need to know about or should know about?
Time's the game tomorrow night, Troy? 7:15. It's varsity, 5:45, JV and CT.
Okay. So then we're on to did anybody have any questions for our gals this evening? Thank you both very much. You know the drill. If you've got things you need to take care of, you won't hurt our feelings by leaving earlier. You're welcome to stay as long as you like. 3B, then we're going to move into Dr. Bezik's superintendent's report, please.
Sure, a few things to make you aware of here. Today we met today talking about situation with St. Anne's busing, which we didn't talk about this before, but we're going to end our year early. They're not, but we are still responsible for busing. So we're working out routes on that, and it was kind of interesting. They came with a proposed route today, and it was an hour, 50-minute bus ride each way, and I almost fell off my chair. So I don't think that's going to fly. So we're going to throw another bus in there, so it's typical to what we have now. But that might not come into play a special route, because depending on what we do with summer school, it may just be a continuation of what we have now. And we're looking at 9 days of a special route if we don't. So just a little FYI to be aware that regardless of what our schedule is, we are responsible for transporting their students till the end of their school year. So, and again, it looks like 9 days. Again, it depends on what we do with snow days. We're already down one of them. So we just hooked up to do a traffic study at our intersections. When we talked last week, it was 2 weeks ago, at our work session with Mark and Johnson and Wold, we've got to figure out what to do with these intersections up at Bruce Larson and the new one that's coming. And so they're going to start a traffic count. Is it tomorrow, Bob? Yes. And have that study done, so it'll help give them some data to look at to see how these have to be designed. Because nowadays they're throwing in roundabouts, and could be lighted intersection, could be four-way stop, what have you. So we want to see what the best use of our dollars is for that. So that's happening. Thursday I sat through police chief interviews. They started out with 6 candidates, but by the time they got to the interviews, they had 3, because 3 had already found other jobs. I have no idea who they're going to recommend for that. That's up to the village council, but really 2 out of 3 were pretty good candidates. And the interesting process sitting there with all the chiefs in the area. Actually, they were in a different room from us, and I think they'll have the final say on what the recommendation is to the village board. So that's soon to come. Mark and Johnson's contract that's on the agenda tonight. The contract is good to go. It's clean. Trevor gave us a green light on that. The piece that I think Bruce and I are a little concerned about that we've got still have control over is the cost estimates for the different projects, and just the way they're estimating their charges in here. Division 1 in general conditions seems a little high, and so we'll work on that. And then the difference in what's included in Division 51, which is construction management, plus their fee of 1.85% for construction management services. So we want a breakdown of exactly what's in those numbers for each project, so we can make sure we're not getting double charged, or we're best use of our dollars. So I think, Bruce, does that kind of sum it up?
Yeah.
But the contract itself is good. And these are extra pieces that are right now cost estimates. They won't become part of that until the bidding process. Let's see. I've been trying to get to most of the concerts. for sure all the elementary concerts we've been having over at the high school, just to thank parents for supporting public education, supporting our referendum, and talking just a few moments about, we did have a second part to this that we weren't able to do this time, and that, we're not gonna give up on it. But, we appreciate your support, what have you. The other night was really fun. The class of 2032 performed.
Wow.
About 20 seconds before they went on, I did the math. I thought, no way, 2032.
Isn't that amazing?
It's coming from a 1975 graduate. Felt really young.
Oh.
Let's see. A little bit on the elementary construction. They are set to go over the holiday break in that entryway there. They're gonna get all the messy stuff done. All the cutting the holes in the walls and all the dirty stuff. The steel, or excuse me, the door frames and things like that, those are long lead items. They will be installing those over Martin Luther King holiday, that weekend there. So it's gonna be a two-part piece there. So again, with all the kids gone over the break, they'll get the messy stuff done and get that installed. Then that project will be complete. Last thing I have, the enrollment numbers, from year to date, we're up 16, but we're down 5 from last month, which is, not a bad place to be. Questions, comments?
Thank you. And the financial reports, did anyone have any questions? I don't know if Dave is with us this evening.
Dave's in his office.
Okay, so if you did, I hope you've sent them on to Dave. If not, so we'll go into 3E. And for any in the audience, those financial reports are also available online through our website, the district website. So I'm glad to have them there. I think it makes it easier to answer some questions. So we'll go to 3E1, Bridging Somerset. Was there?
Well, the only thing we need is a board rep from here. I was hoping to get a first meeting in December, but it's just not gonna happen. So we're gonna look at the first part of January, but, every elected group is gonna have one representative, so. If,
I
someone
thought
wanted
Bob was
some-
gonna be on it, but you're representing the village? But
Yeah,
is-
we'll go with that.
Yeah. Well, I was on it last time, I guess I'll give it my best shot if you need, I just figured Bob would cover us.
It's probably gonna be 4 or 5 meetings, and
It's tough, wearing 2 hats in all these meetings.
Uh-huh.
The monthly?
It may be 3 or 4 times during a quarter, would you
well, it's
think?
gonna be about 4 or 5 times throughout the spring, through the winter and spring. Basically, we wanna get to a point where every entity has a charge, as far as, like we did last time. But however, this is a little different take this year, because it's not going to be driven specifically by, all the elected officials. So we're gonna have different people working on different initiatives. So we'll have very few, one board member from here and myself with the school initiatives. And the rest will be community people working on that. So it's gonna take a different twist to it, so be more inclusive.
And does it need to be the same person every month? Is that most effective?
Yeah, it
Okay.
really does. And again, we'll probably get it done in 4 or 5 meetings, and depending how quick we move on that.
Is
And
that something you might be interested? I don't want to.
I just have to know what day of the week it is.
Oh, they don't always, it isn't even always the same, is it?
No, it's usually we'll come to consensus at the meeting and say, okay, we have this much work to be done. Can we get it done in the next 4 or 5 weeks, and then have a meeting? So it really, the first couple I think will be fairly quick, because we're gonna go through a planning process. And then after that, it would probably spread out a little bit.
Let me mull it over with the family.
Thank you.
So we just, need to know, not right now, but
And if not, you,
I'll do it but I already did it, but I'll do it if no one else does.
thank you. Anything else from Bridging?
no.
All right, CISA 11, actually, Jerry said he just got through visiting with all the schools within the CISA 11. He highlighted, it's always interesting, he said they find out, he does a nice job of asking, what do we do well? And they've said that the majority of the schools, actually all of them, had said they're very good at listening and then trying to respond or create what's necessary or what would be valued or helpful to school districts, which I think it does reflect what their activities have been. He also highlighted the April 1st PAC board meeting, which is when we can all join in seeing, they have a guest speaker coming in, Randy Fox. So if, that's an event that I think if the majority of the board could join, it would be a really beneficial one.
What's the topic?
Randy Fox is gonna, let me see here, high energy speaker, transformational leadership. Last time we were gonna focus on telling your story, but this one he says a leader worth following. So
Will you let us know when that,
April 1st,
April 1st?
Yeah.
What day of the week is that?
Wednesday.
And a time?
He doesn't have the time in here and I don't remember writing down. I will find out.
Is it during the day or in the evening?
Usually it's the early evening, but I don't know for sure. I wanna double check that, but I will double check it. It's a good one.
Those are usually pretty good.
They are. They do a nice job. All right, so, and they do a phenomenal job of writing grants. That's how they are funded, the majority of their works. So I sure wish we could get some classes from that. Onward to community ed, Catherine?
I do. Renee said she's working on finding classes for late January into April. Should have offerings out by mid to late January. Currently, our community ed has a volleyball league that is active,
Oh.
and another class is coming up on snowmobile safety in January.
January 3rd and 4th.
That's been there a long time. That one in the Hunters Week was a big one. All right, and Lori with the Memorial Scholarship?
The applications have been revised. They'll be available on the Somerset School District website January 13th, right after around the semester time. They'll be due on March 4th, and the presentation of scholarships is scheduled for May 6th from 6 until 7 p.m. So we encourage all our students, all of our seniors, to apply for those scholarships. We have many available for many different areas.
So what were some of the revisions that they made when you say it was revised?
Just some things to streamline it.
Okay. Getting it on the web maybe more so?
It was already on the web
Okay.
last year.
Okay. Great, thank you. Did we miss anything? Maybe any updates from your building that you were sharing earlier? Is there anything you want to share with all of us on that?
On the building meetings that, you know,
Right.
no, well, it's just been really interesting. A lot of kind of more personal things, you know, personal situations and that, rather than anything I could say as here's a theme or, you know, here's what's kind of trending out there. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been good. It's nice just popping in some classrooms and, you know, in the past I've been in every building every day, but now I'm concentrating time, so I usually pick either a library or some spot in the office and just kind of general traffic place, and, you know, then people come up, sit down and
Great.
share a little bit and that. So, I mean, for this year, it's doing what it's intended to do, but, you know, when we get back into a regular swing, if we want to entertain going back to what we had before, great.
Okay. I did not get any red cards. Did anyone have any questions or anything they wanted to share with us in the audience? Don't everybody jump at once. All right, then we're gonna hop over 4 and move right into 5, the advanced services and operations. So we're looking for a motion, recommend the school board approve the contract with Market and Johnson as presented. Do I have anyone willing to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Bruce.
I'll second.
Thank you, Katie. Do we have any questions on it? I know Dr. Beasley covered the majority of what we might ask there. Or
Well,
give
that-
us a brief
yeah,
update, I should say.
I was just gonna ask a question about that, cause I mean, you might have addressed it, but the concern that you expressed, we're okay with signing this contract and it's still,
Right, those are, the sheets that I was looking at here, I think you got copies of them last week, those are cost estimates right now.
yes,
And see, we won't even get a guaranteed maximum price from Market Johnson until the bidding, because why would they do that when they don't know what the bids are gonna be? So once we get that, everything's gonna get tightened up here as soon as the bids happen, but this is stuff that, you know, Bruce's expertise really helps because he's dealing with this stuff on a daily basis, which, you know, there's a lot of dollars involved with, you know, just in the site conditions, there's $1 million. And we wanna make sure we're not duplicating services and things like that, so we get the best bang for our value, our dollars. because, we're in that kind of touchy area where we've got to watch our pennies on this thing. We don't have, until the bids come in, we're kind of like on okay ground. When the bids come in, then we'll know if we'll be relaxing a little bit or sweating because we have to make some changes. I mean, that's just what happens. But right now we're in good position, and the bidding dates are gonna work in our favor, we hope, and the strategy is good, solid.
And the research, or I guess the detail we're working on getting now is so that when the bids come through and they bring it to that board meeting on the 6th, we already know what is in every one of those line items. So we can just get it approved. So we're trying to get ahead of it. I guess we didn't really have to bring it up. The contract's good. It's when they make the amendment for the GMP. We're just trying to get all that ironed out now.
What's the GMP?
The price, the maximum price.
Okay.
Guaranteed maximum price.
Okay.
Bruce, thank you so much. I'm
Yeah,
sure the
I-
time and effort here is
Totally appreciate
considerable.
it.
We're lucky.
Yeah.
So then, on to item 5. Any other questions here for that one? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, so we have an approval of that contract as presented. We're on to item 5B then, the possible consideration of the possible exceptions to the compensation model. Do we, how do we proceed on this?
I'll just throw this out there. I sent you out some information. We've been working this thing every which way we can to just try to somewhat make sense out of it. And there's a lot of strings involved depending on, what direction you go. You've seen the costs involved, some of the potential continuations, I don't know if I want to say risks, but just some of the other things that are out there that this could affect. I had 2 conversations with Victoria last week, and as I reiterated my email there, that obviously the farther we move away from the original set or grid, it does lose integrity, but she said that's your decision as a board. And if you have dollars, make the decision whichever way you would like. The thing is that she stressed over and over about consistency through the plan, through the model. One thing, I stood behind her data and her research and her practice, and this is no means derogatory of her or her company, but she's used to city entities. And Dave and I had a long conversation with her on Friday, and she did not grasp, or she did grasp, but didn't follow how teachers' step and lane schedules work, and which really surprised me. And Dave, we both kind of stepped back. And again, it doesn't have really anything to do with this, but in her world, when you move to a higher degree, you go down to the bottom of that lane rather than slide over. In a typical teacher step and lane grid, if you're BA, let's just say BA 24, you get your master's, you got 8 years, you slide over on the master's at 8th or 9th. In her world, it's dealt with just dollars where, okay, what's your next highest step in the master's lane? And that's how she placed everyone, which was consistent with how we placed everyone before in all the different groups. But it was just interesting that, they don't recognize years of experience in a lot of times in the public sector. It's more by pay and step. They have the lanes, but they don't have the steps. I hope I'm making this clear. What's that?
As mud.
Well, you two know what step and lane schedules are and how they work. And, when somebody gets their master's, they don't go down to step 1 in a typical system. They slide straight across to the next year of experience. However, when she placed everyone in the rules were that they went to the next highest on the pay grid regardless where their years of experience were. And that's how everyone was placed. again, I'm hoping that will make this more confusing, but it was very confusing to Dave and I when we realized that, that was, not the understanding she had, because she was going through, she said, your way is more expensive. Well, that's the way teacher schedules are, step and lane. They recognize years of experience. And she said, you can do it whatever way you want, but again, that's not the way she set up the original grid and how she placed everyone, which was fine, because you did the same thing 3 years ago with that original compensation plan. You took a dollar amount and you placed that was their number. It threw away years of experience. So again,
But it's my recollection that, we did that with that group, but then we as a board chose on your recommendation, not hers, it was yours and Dave's recommendation with the dollar amounts that would coincide with that, to place them on the spot that got them the closest, because we talked about alternatives.
well, there was different schedules out there, but we did the same thing with the non-certified. And so we followed through with the teachers also. Everyone was placed to the next grid higher than what they were making. It didn't make any difference on their years though. Years were irrelevant at their placement. But it was just, and I'm just throwing this out as an interesting piece of our conversation, that that's the way we will proceed from here was not the way she expects or anticipated the teacher's schedule. I mean, we expect when somebody gets there, hits their degree or whatever the next step is, they don't lose any years of experience. They slide over into that next lane and continue on. Where in her world, they don't. They go back to maybe a 2% increase.
So to penalize these people for the timing of earning their additional credits is not something that I personally, as an individual, am interested in doing.
This was Victoria's first school?
No. It was the conversation that we had that, Dave and I kind of like, this is not how teacher schedules work going forward. It was kind of a little surprise to us that, and it wasn't a recommendation by her. She got it. She knew after we talked it through, how it works and what happened. But it was a surprise, because I did not even think of that way of doing things as we go forward. It really has nothing to do with the placement.
No.
It's just philosophical differences on how plans are put together, and she deals with a lot of plans. But, we're so ingrained in the step and lane that it was just unusual that I don't think we even thought of. We couldn't figure out why she kept saying a few different things as far as placement, and then it hit us that that's a different world, that, a different concept, should I say. We're on the right track. What, Lori's comment here about penalizing, somewhere along the line, there's gotta be a reset. And we gotta find a way to move forward, because these things keep coming up now. And that's the only thing I'm worried about, and that's why I made a recommendation I did in my note, that, it's gotta, somewhere, we gotta stop and just say, here's where we're going. That's all I'm saying. It's your decision, but it's perpetuating things.
My
People
concern,
who got lane changes in the past, though, were compensated for those lane changes. And so to assume that those people are gonna say, I wanna take it back, it's not the same situation at all, because they did get compensated. They did make that lateral move across to a new lane, and to take that away from people who just happen to make the lane change at this specific time.
the unfortunate thing is this is precisely what led to, from my perspective, the Act 10. And I'm concerned that as we start to take it apart and restructure it to what was previous to that, there's going to be more repercussions than just this single incident. If we tackle it each year individually like this, I would like to see us pick a point, just as you're suggesting, Dr. Bezick, and start with it. And to say that we're taking it away, it was taken away with Act 10. So now we're trying to put something back in place. So it's not that we're taking it away now, we're trying to start something now.
Well, actually, we are talking about taking it away from one select group of people because what we've been doing is increasing salary by years of experience and by lanes. So people who made a lane change last year were compensated for it.
It's a timing issue, and that's what really I support it as well, because
Can we
I
make a
don't,
motion on this?
that's what I was wondering.
Okay, can we?
Yep.
Do it.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the possible exemptions on this lane change illustration.
But you totally interrupted.
I know. We got closed sessions, $11,970.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Bruce to approve the table shared with lane change illustrations
So
in the amount of $11,970, seconded by Lori. So Katie, now you had some comments you wanted to share on that?
I kind of lost my train of thought, but it's all about the timing issue and how we implement that, and that's totally on us, and I don't see this spreading out, because this is about the implementation, and just the timing of when they made these changes. So this will not happen next year. Once, the grid is implemented, it's not going to snowball because it's implemented. This was just about where these people are placed and the poor timing of what happened on that placement. And I can totally support us making sure that somebody who does the same thing next year would move over as illustrated before. And so it doesn't make sense, because you're actually making the problem worse by having the gap grow again, and we've been trying to avoid that. This is just a way of implementing it that is totally justified.
I find it very interesting that we are not the first school Victoria has done, and that this would be out of character for her. Did anyone else have any questions or comments on it?
Marie, and again, there wasn't anything disparaging about
Oh, I
her.
know.
It was her perspective of,
Yep.
And again, she's been in the school business before,
Yeah.
but it was, her and Dave worked very hard on that whole
I know they
grid
did.
together, and Dave had a lot of input into that. And so, I just wanna say that it was you had asked for us to have a conversation with her,
Thank you.
and it was just, the takeaway came from me for me, that I was surprised, that, both Dave and I were surprised. So again, I stand behind her work. I think she did a great job for us. And that conversation and what, that had no effect on the outcome of this grid. As Katie said, this is a timing thing, and that's what it has to be looked at as. It's purely what it is. It's nothing else with the mechanics of Victoria's work, so.
So any other questions on it? We have a motion on the table by Bruce, and it's seconded by Lori, to approve the lane change illustration in the amount of $11,970. Is that correct, Bruce?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
what did you say?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
That's the number.
Okay. So, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So does this give us our final settling point then, our starting point, so that,
We
In
were,
theory,
it's,
yeah.
yeah, it's a
Could
reset.
come up again.
It's another,
Well, I mean, people could, like you said, it's gotta stop sometime.
all right, so then let's move on to item 6, educational delivery and learner connectedness. We have a special situation, 6A. Did you want to speak to that, Shannon?
I can. I haven't necessarily been the one directly
Oh, I'm
involved in it.
sorry, maybe
but,
there's someone else that is?
That person isn't here, so I'm happy to answer
Okay.
questions. I think really it's just a case of, we aren't positive the student turned in, his paperwork. He said he did. We don't have it, WITC doesn't have it, so we're trying to just give him an opportunity to make sure he gets the programming that he was looking to have second semester. It's really kind of as simple as that. No one can seem to locate the paperwork. So we're trying to be able to keep him on his path by letting him go to WITC second semester and just reapproving his Start College Now application.
Is there anything in ours that says we cannot approve it? Because I want to encourage him to keep going if he's,
See
If you
there's
really
any
want to go.
restrictions on this.
okay. So I would make a motion that do we need a motion for you to be able to do that? Is that why that's
Yes.
here?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would make the motion that we approve the additional spring 2020 Start College Now application. Would
I'll
anyone?
second it.
Thank you, Katie. So we have a motion on the table and a second, made by myself, seconded by Katie, to approve that application. All those, I'm sorry, any questions from anyone? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We're gonna keep him on this path then. Now, we're on to the exciting flex module schedule update. Thank you, Shannon. 6B.
Pardon the sweatpants, I just came for basketball practice, so a little casual today. So I was asked to come and give kind of a close to mid-year update on how things are going with the schedule. Just kind of provide you some up-to-date information regarding kind of where we were last year, some changes that have occurred with our schedule this year, and just kind of give some more information about our vision and kind of the great things we're doing at the high school. So wanted to start with just kind of giving a little bit of a timeline in terms of kind of where we started with this change. Anytime at the high school level when you are doing a master schedule change, and I would argue it wouldn't matter what master schedule you're changing to, that is a big undertaking. And then you kind of put on top of it, moving from a traditional schedule to certainly a non-traditional model. There's some added layers to there as well. So I just want to kind of outline for you a little bit in terms of from 17-18 through currently this presentation right here, kind of where we've been as a staff, information that's been presented to parents, information that's been presented to you as a board, just as kind of a nice visual of our timeline up until this point. So anytime that I talk about our schedule and kind of the vision of what we're doing in the building, we always start with our why. You see I have a lot of staff here, which is awesome, and I know I speak to this to death in terms of why we're doing the things that we're doing. Everything that we start with is grounded in our strategic plan. So looking at kind of why we had, frankly, the license to make the type of change that we made is grounded in our strategic plan for the district. So looking at strategy 1, I'm not going to read that for you word for word, and also looking at our education and delivery result statements 2 and 7, where it specifically mentions flexible scheduling. It mentions personalized learning, which is something that right now as a building we're really starting to kind of grab onto. We've had a lot of conversations this year in particular about personalized learning being a part of our PPGs within our building, being a part of our student learning objectives. A lot of our professional development is being wrapped around personalized learning. So this really right here has provided us the roadmap in terms of some of the why behind the big change that we made. If you've heard me talk about our schedule, I can't help myself, but I really have to talk about kind of why we are where we are in terms of having to look back before we can look forward. Most schools are still functioning under an educational system that was created in the 1800s, really designed to move people through a mundane, factory-like environment to prepare for that type of society. We know that very little now in 2019, almost 2020, looks as it did in 1890. I give the example that, you know, we would never stand for our doctor's office to look like it did in 1890. We would never stand for our dentist's office to look that way. So I get confused a little bit as to why we still grab onto that fiber of allowing schools to look like they did in 1890 when that frankly just, it can't be that way anymore. We know the skills that our kids need now when they leave Somerset High School look very different than they did in the 1800s, very different than they did 10 years ago. We have a lot of conversations in our building about how we get kids to a point of being able to problem solve in a complex way, critical thinking, creativity, people management, because the role of educators has changed. It looks different now than it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. We know that as educators, our job is no longer just to fill kids with information, because kids can get information lots and lots of places. It no longer just lives within the teacher. So we want to make sure that this part's really important. We're helping kids learn how to learn. And we believe that that cannot happen to the maximum extent if we are trying to still function within a traditional setting. You've probably heard me talk about this as well. We think that we have to provide opportunities for our kids in school to be able to develop the skills that we know they're going to need when they leave us. So we want to put kids intentionally in a position to be able to have to learn how to manage workflow, learn how to advocate for themselves, organization, personal accountability, meeting deadlines, risk-taking, all those kinds of things that we believe will serve our kids really, really well when they leave us, no matter where they go when they leave us. This system that we have created right now is not designed just for kids going to a 4-year school or a 2-year school. We believe that putting kids in positions in school to be able to develop these skills is going to set them up better for their individual futures, knowing that kids are going to make mistakes. Kids don't do this real well all of the time. Some kids need more support to build those skills than others. We have lots of kids in the building right now that can do all of these things just fine with no support. We have kids that need a lot of support, and we believe that's okay. We have a lot of conversations regarding autonomy, purpose, and mastery. We want kids to be active participants in designing their educational experience. We want to help make decisions with kids, not for kids. Sometimes do we have to make decisions for kids? Yep, because we work in a building of 500 teenagers. Sometimes that happens for sure. But we want kids to be able to have that ownership in helping kind of design what's going to be their educational experience, because we believe that provides greater accountability to the learning than it ever could if we lived in a system where it's adult-centered, where adults are telling kids what to do all of the time, okay? This last bullet point I think is really important, and I think it helps people kind of understand our philosophy in the building, that learning is flexible, if not optional. If you walk into our building at any given time, and I please would love you to do that, it's not the Wild West, it's not a free-for-all. Learning is flexible, but it's not optional. There are things that you are still going to have to do. There are tests you're going to have to take. There's assignments you're going to have to finish, right? But we allow you a lot of voice and choice to determine how those things are done, but not doing it isn't an option. So kind of our bottom line, we believe that we are best serving our kids by moving away from a traditional, antiquated system and providing students an environment that kind of lives within the flex mod, which kind of moves me to part 2 here. So I want to just kind of briefly talk about some changes that we have recognized and made as we kind of move from year 1 to year 2. So last year our mods were 15 minutes per mod. This year, due to a combination of reducing our passing time and our added time due to the construction and the shortened year, now our mods are 18 minutes in length. That's 3 more minutes per mod per class period, which over the course of a school year adds up to a significant increase in instructional time. We've added what we call freshman flex. So freshmen at the beginning of the year basically didn't have access to flex time. They were scheduled during their non-scheduled time in the day with a teacher to really help them understand how to navigate A, the transition to high school, and B, the transition to living within a system like we offer. A system that provides a lot of independence, a lot of freedom, and there's certain skills that kids have to have in order to do that successfully. So all freshmen started there. Right now we have, I would say, probably about 60 freshmen that don't have freshman flex on their schedule at all anymore, because they've been able to acquire those skills in a rather quick fashion in terms of what they need to be able to navigate. We have some freshmen that still have all of their mods that still have freshman flex on there, which is okay too, and we have some that have kind of half and half, really depending on what those kids need individually. We added a mod 11 freshman check-in for all freshmen, so they meet with their advisor basically smack dab in the middle of the day, every single day for 18 minutes, and we kind of use that as a check-in, refresh, how'd the morning go, let's talk about your afternoon. We have some advisories now that are using that as mindfulness time as well, and they've shown some really good feedback there from kids too. We've tightened our expectations regarding the use of cell phones. I've kind of resigned myself to the fact that it's going to be an ongoing battle. I think that we've done a much better job this year in terms of laying out expectations of what kids are allowed to do with cell phones. The fact that now we have Chromebooks has been helpful. Allows kids to kind of at least have a decent device to be able to do work and access what they need versus trying to get all that stuff on their phone like last year. But having a lot of conversations, and Brandon Berry can speak to that because his space is hard to manage sometimes with cell phone use, but really having a lot of conversations about that. Change the phasing of some of our classes based off of the feedback and recommendations from teachers. Now that teachers have kind of lived the system through a year, they were in a better position as we kind of built the schedule this year to say like, man, I don't think I need this, can we try this? How about on this day, let's do this instead, which has been helpful. We shortened our morning advisory and added an end of the day advisory, so that didn't impact any instructional time. We went from a 30-minute advisory and we kind of shrunk it down to 17 minutes in the morning. And now we have an advisory at the end of the day as well, which we feel like is a nice way to kind of bookend the beginning and end of our day. We're much more intentional about the expectations for our flex spaces. I've been very open that I think a miss that I had last year in terms of our flex space is that I kind of just assumed that when we open up all these flex spaces, kids would just kind of know what to do within those spaces. This year we've provided, I would say, much more structure, even visuals within each of our flex spaces regarding what those expectations are. And moved multiple classes around on our master schedule to try to reduce conflicts the best that we can. We can live with the fact that conflicts are always going to be a part of our system, which we don't believe is a bad thing, but any opportunity that we have to mitigate conflicts, we want to make sure that we seize that opportunity. So one question in particular that I was asked to address tonight was, how do you support your struggling learners? I think there's a bit of a misconception that our schedule is built for high flyers, that our schedule is built for high achieving kids. And while I believe that our schedule is built for all kids, every kid that we have in the building, I want to specifically address what do we do when we have kids that need more support. As I mentioned earlier, we have kids in the building, frankly, that don't need any support. They can move through their day. They don't need any structured time. During their flex time, they're doing exactly what they need to do, and that's many, many of our kids. We also have kids that aren't quite there yet with their skill set, and so I'm going to kind of run you through a bit of a continuum in terms of kind of least restrictive to most restrictive in terms of how we help those kids that need more support. So we rely quite a bit on the advisor that is matched up with students. As I said, we start and end every single day in advisory. We have very specific expectations of what I want teachers to be doing with students during advisory. So we kind of start by, if we have a student that we're starting to flag that we see is like, oh man, so-and-so struggling a little bit, the first contact we make is with the advisor. And I expect the advisor to be having some one-on-one conversations with students regarding flex time, regarding goal setting, maybe doing a daily check-in, check-out system, daily grade checks, those kinds of things. The next piece of that is eventually we add in conversations happening with student, advisor, and teacher. If there's a class or classes that a student is struggling in particular, we want to make sure that those three people are having some really good conversations about what next and what do we need to do to support that student. Teachers being available during their resource time, that was something we had available last year as well. We make sure that we publicize it to students in terms of which teachers are available when. So hopefully they can kind of match up, man, if I need help in a math class, I know there's a math teacher available, these mods, and that's when I have flex time, awesome. Does it work perfectly like that all the time? No, but more often than not, we have found that students are able to connect with a teacher, at least in their content area that they need help with during that resource time. I mentioned freshman flex, I won't go over that again. I mentioned the Mod 11 freshman check-in as well. Eventually, we may get to a time where we need to remove a student's flex time from their schedule and we replace it with what is called personalized learning time. So last year, you maybe heard me talk about it, we used the term back scheduling. We kind of felt that had a negative connotation, so we changed the term to personalized learning time. So we specifically look at a student schedule and we look at teacher schedule and we intentionally schedule them to be with a teacher in a specific area of need for a minimum of 2 weeks. The counselor is involved in that conversation as well. And then we monitor from there. About every 2 weeks, we check in with the teacher, we check in with the advisor, the student, say, how's it going? Do we need more time? Was 2 weeks good enough and we're good? And then we remove that PLT time and add flex time back on their schedule. We don't ever necessarily intend this to be kind of a life sentence forever, because we want students to be building those skills necessary to be able to navigate flex time in a successful way. We have some students that have on their schedule what's called a Success Center, where they have daily mods with a specific teacher. Hopefully every day. We have some students where we can only squeeze in maybe 4 days a week. But that is intentionally designed to help work on executive functioning skills. So it's not necessarily an academic intervention, although it could be, and sometimes that's a nice added bonus. Most of the time, those teachers are working with students on organization, goal setting, planning, short-term, long-term, those kinds of things. We try to have Success Center, or the teachers that do Success Center, having really small groups of kids. Sometimes it doesn't always work out perfect like that, but we're aiming to have 4 to 5, maybe 6 kids at a time within a Success Center, so that teacher can really work in a small group of kids that need that level of support. Okay, so we also have this year, starting second semester, we'll be implementing what's called Spartan Academy. So this is actually going to be an after-school type programming that will be led by Sarah Colling for students that just aren't doing what we need them to do during the day. So it will have a restorative lens on it. Yeah, Kathy, right? Restorative lens. But basically what we're saying is, hey, we're going to provide a whole bunch of opportunity for you to do what you need to do during the school day. And if we get to a point over the course of time that you're choosing not to do that, then we may have to steal a bit of your time after school. And this will be very structured, very intentional. It's not detention per se, although I suppose you could put a bit of a flair on it, but really wanting kids to understand that we have really high expectations for every kid in the building, and we have certain things that you are going to do. And the work doesn't go away. We're not just going to fail you in all of your classes. One way or the other, the work's going to get done. And if we provide supports during the day and that's not when it's happening, then we may have to move to what's called Spartan Academy. We have Restorative Justice, which is a weekly opportunity for students to engage in the ability to address issues they're having potentially with peers, potentially with adults in the building, through a restorative lens. So that is led by Sarah Colling and Zach Eichten. We have a restorative referral form that teachers can fill out if there was potentially an issue that occurred between them and a student that we want to have a little bit higher level intervention for, but maybe not necessarily something that needs to involve myself or Trent. So they have done a fantastic job of kind of developing that program. This year, kind of the next step we've taken with that is having a lot more follow-up and involvement with teachers themselves. Really having them be a part of that process, because nobody feels good when there's an interaction happening in the classroom that doesn't go well. And how do we fix that, and how do we kind of put kids and teachers in a position to be able to move forward in a positive way. We also provide kids a structured day. So this could be for a variety of reasons. We've moved to using this in lieu of like out of school suspension, for example. We do this if we have kids that are having trouble attending all of their scheduled mods, where they basically are escorted to and from all of their classes throughout the day. Their flex time is in the office, so they don't have access to flex spaces. And basically they have a whole bunch of adults in their world that get them where they need to go, while we help them build the skill to be able to navigate the schedule in a successful way. Kind of the last piece here, we have our Achieve program, which I think you're familiar with, run by Ms. Siskel. That's our alternative education program. This is what we consider the most restrictive level of support that we have in the building. Very small percentage of kids that are actually in that program, but we hope to kind of meet the needs of our kids before we get to that point. And then these are some different conversations in terms of students in that program. So just kind of wrap up this part of it here. And I kind of mentioned this the last time I addressed the board regarding the report cards, but in our previous system, you know, when we needed to intervene with a student, we would rely on before or after school, which was ridiculously inconsistent, hard on teachers, hard on kids. relying on teachers to give up their lunch and prep, finding any time you can grab during the day because there was not dedicated time during the day to be able to do that. If we had behavioral type things happening, we were pretty quick to jump to suspension for behavior or referring for a period truancy citation. I just threw up kind of a stat here which I thought was interesting. When we looked up last year at this exact time, as of last Friday, we had given out 22 period truancy citations. This year, as of last Friday, we've given out 1. I think there's a variety of reasons why that's occurred. I think we've become better at utilizing our supports we have in the building, more comfortable within our system, and frankly, we are continuing to create ways to support kids during the school day. Trying to get kids before and after school is hard. With the amount of kids that we have involved in activities, that have jobs, we have a 0-hour class that 80 plus kids are in. So we're really trying to bank on that time right now that we have from 8 until 3:30. So as I kind of did the math and kind of looked at our traditional system that we had versus the flex mod, and right now, probably by my low estimation, we have over 6 times the supports available for any student who is struggling academically, emotionally, or behaviorally versus what we were able to offer kids in a traditional system. So I might come back in a year and I might have a whole other slide of additional supports that we're able to offer kids. Right now I feel really good about kind of the comprehensive, as I said, continuum in terms of some kids need a little tiny bit, some kids need none, and some kids need a whole bunch. And I feel like we're putting not only ourselves, our students, and our teachers in a good position to be able to address those needs as they come up with our kids. So the second question that I was asked to address tonight is basically, how do you know what you're doing is working, right? What are you using to measure if this whole big change is successful or not? So, and that's a great question because this is a big change, right? It looks really different than anything else around us. So how do you know what you're doing is working? So I'm going to kind of start again by going back to our strategic plan. So when you look at our strategic plan, it is demanding that when kids leave Somerset High School, that they have been able to show competency basically in these 2 outcomes, right? I'm not going to read them for you, but our strategic plan is dictated that by the time they leave here, this is what we want to guarantee that our kids can do, right? So the question is, how do you know that? Because these things are not easily measurable, right? It's not like our strategic plan says we want to make sure every kid has a 22 on their composite ACT. That's easily measurable, right? But looking at this, to be honest with you, this is kind of where the question goes, and this is what we're kind of wrestling with, right? What can our learners demonstrate, and what can we observe from our learners? And those 2 pieces, those 2 questions are what we are really actively working on right now. I do not have a finalized answer for you. I may not have a finalized answer for you for another 2 or 3 years as we're kind of working through this and kind of digging into this a little bit further, right? And as I kind of mentioned, test scores are easily measurable, right? That's what our report card is for, and those things are important for sure. But we think that what we're trying to do here is so much more comprehensive than just our standardized test scores. But I'll talk about those too, okay? So a couple things you have to kind of remember in terms of implementation science. It probably will take 3 to 5 full years for us to fully be able to stand up, or me, fully be able to stand up here and say, yep, this is what's working with the Flex Mod, this isn't working, this is a train wreck, this is awesome, right? Right now, anecdotally, I love where we are and I love the things that we're doing. Do I have a list here and a couple slides of like, whew, some things we still need to work on? You bet I do. But really until our current 10th grade class goes all the way through and graduates, that will be one of our first kind of measurement points because that's the first class that will have gone through the Flex Mod schedule for their entire high school career, okay? So in the meantime, we're going to continue to develop and monitor in a whole bunch of ways in terms of, is what we're doing working? Is it working for kids? Is it getting kids ready for whatever they're doing when they leave here, right? Knowing that that's going to mean lots of things alongside of just our test scores, okay? So let's talk about that really quick. And I'm not going to dive into this too far because I already kind of covered this when I spoke a couple weeks ago. But absolutely, our standardized test scores, those are important. You bet. Our academics, of course, that's our #1 job. For sure that we need to be monitoring and digging really deeply into our academic test scores. So at the high school, that's the ACT, the Aspire, and the Wisconsin Forward. You heard me say last time I was up here, the ACT is a valuable test for most and not all. We are not putting all of our eggs into the ACT basket, okay? But when we look at kind of where do we stand in comparison to other schools around us, to be honest with you, I don't do that. Because I know those are never apples to apples comparisons because of just some of these reasons, right? We don't have the same students, cohorts, demographics, staffing, educational delivery, and testing practices, just to name a few, as any other school around us, right? So we don't spend a whole lot of time worried about where we compare to New Richmond, Osceola, St. Croix Central. We look at where does Somerset High School compare to Somerset High School from year to year to year, okay? I tell kids all the time, and I tell any parent meeting that I've had, I will guarantee you that your student will get the content that they need to be ready for whatever it is when they leave here, right? I don't believe those needs are the same for every single kid we have in our building, right? The needs of kids heading to a 4-year college are gonna look and sound different than the needs of kids for a 2-year or military or kids that we have leaving, heading right into the workforce, right? We wanna make sure that we can address all of those needs in a more individualized, personalized basis versus the one-size-fits-all system. And I truly believe this part. If we're gonna really talk about personalizing student learning, which again is referenced and demanded in our strategic plan and a part of our vision, then we can't standardize the success. We can't look at our standardized test scores alone and determine this is or isn't working if we're truly looking at personalizing the path for our kids. So, I know this is a lot to take in, I'm not going to read all this, but I want to just put this up there because one measurement of success that we use and put a lot of stock in is our student engagement survey that we give kids twice a year. So we gave it twice last year, we just gave it again this fall, we'll give it again this spring. And we have a lot of conversations as a staff in our PLCs, we wrap goals around the questions that we have in the student engagement survey. Because we want to know, is the system that we're creating, is it serving you or not, right? And believe me, kids will tell us. Kids will be honest. Yep, this is working, or no, Donnelly, this is a disaster. I leave a part on there where they can put in comments, right? Scary, but true, okay? So these are just a couple things. This is not the whole survey, but I just grabbed a couple things, and you kind of see I've got my little key down there, but so these are kids that we want to know, right? These are things we want to know. When you come into the building, are you engaged in what you're doing here? Okay, that's really important to us, right? Is what you're doing in your classes is helping you outside of school? Do you have adults that care about you here? Right? Do you have the opportunity to pursue your passions and strengths while you're in the building? Okay? I talked a lot about being involved in activities. Okay? In the last 7 days, someone has told me that I have done good work. I pulled these out because these are the ones specifically that as a building and within our teams that we are having a ton of conversation about. We're having a lot of conversation instructionally about what does it mean to engage kids in what you're doing in your classroom. And that's different than empowering, right? Engagement is basically what can I do for a student. Empowerment is what can a student do for themselves, okay? So, a lot of conversation here, really good information. So we take this and basically when we give it again in the spring, how'd we do, right? Did we improve? I don't love this percentage. I've got 55.5% of kids that agree or strongly agree that, yeah, I'm engaged. And I've got almost 30 that are neutral. Like, I'm kind of engaged. Some days yes, some days no, right? So we'll look at those percentages really hard when we get to the spring and kind of make some determinations. Are we succeeding or not, right? So the next couple slides, I'm just going to kind of list some things out here of some other ways that we monitor our success and monitor basically how are we doing, okay? So an A Math and A Reading screener that we give our 9th and 10th graders, we take that data and we take a look at which students are at or below the 25th percentile. Kudos to the middle school because we have very few kids that come to us from the middle school that need significant math and reading intervention. So well done, middle school, okay? Buy Savers, which is our social, emotional, mental health screener that we give kids in the fall and spring. We give a survey to students annually regarding how they use their flex time. And kids are brutally honest of how they use that time, right? Junior conferencing data. So over the last 2 years, so this happens every year in and around semester 1, our counselors meet with our junior students and their families. And I ask them to start keeping track essentially of how many meetings do you have where you have students or parents bringing you concerns, complaints regarding the schedule? Like, I want to know that because if you're sitting in those meetings and you've got 90% of families and parents saying this is a disaster, we need to talk about that, right? So last year in 2018, we had documented 2 meetings essentially where there were some legit concerns and issues of just frankly not being happy with the change. This year to date, Sarah Colling is about 60% through the class in terms of their meetings, hasn't had one. I think that's valuable data. Anytime that we can find something that's measurable in terms of is it working or not, right? We're gonna grab it. And so far, we like that data. Every week we have an RTI and a problem-solving team meeting. We look at that data weekly to try to identify which kids are struggling, which kids need help, which kids needed help but are now rocking it. A lot of conversations about student-specific needs during those meetings. This is the one I'm probably most excited about. We are really closely monitoring our class enrollment. We want to make sure, because one of our big pieces of our why, in terms of why we moved away from a 6-period day, is because we had kids leaving our building very vocal about the fact that they were not able to engage in everything they wanted to engage in, okay? So as we are monitoring our enrollment with our AP classes, College in the Schools, Project Lead the Way, etc., you can kind of read down the line here. And I threw in a little bit of data in terms of what we are already seeing, and these are electives, right? What we are seeing in our electives. I don't have enough staff right now, to be honest with you, to maintain the amount of requests that kids are putting in for our elective classes because they can access so much more. I have some kids that are taking 9 and 10 classes. That's awesome, right? But there are still a little bit of limitations here. I talked to Jamie Pelvicki and just kind of anecdotally said, you know, what changes have you noticed, and I know Eric is here too, what changes have you noticed in your music program? She's like, well, first of all, now Eric and I see our kids every single day score, right? And Jamie said my choir numbers have almost doubled in the last 2 years because now kids can actually take music. Yay! That's how I believe that we're being successful, right? I look at our youth apprenticeship and our school to work. Those numbers have tripled in the last 2 years because kids now have an opportunity to make a better plan in terms of how they can access those things. For a lot of kids in the building, school to work is really important for a variety of reasons, right? So we're excited about this. We've had our AP class. In the past, typically our AP classes, we've only have had to offer 1 section. I have a couple AP classes now, I'm up to almost 3. I mean, that's awesome, right? Because kids have greater access. Okay, just a couple more, stay with me here. Some other ways we're measuring our success. We monitor the number of students that need summer school remediation. Okay, every year we're looking at that number. Monitoring student use of flex time. To be honest, a lot of this is observable and anecdotal. I'm not walking around with a clipboard saying, yep, you're using it, no you're not, yes you are. But we can gather a lot of information just by walking around some flex spaces throughout the day, which Trent and I do a lot of, like, kind of in general, how are things going, right? Monitoring students' ability to navigate conflicts. Monitoring the number of students who are creating their own semester 2 schedules. So this just started today, I'm super excited about it. We gave our juniors and seniors the opportunity, essentially, here's all the information you need to know. Here is access to our semester 2 master schedule. Here are all the classes that you need to make sure that you have. Here is a blank document, build your schedule. And you should see the kids flocking to the office, picking up their stuff and turning in their schedules. It has been absolutely amazing. That is how we know that we're doing what we need to do, because kids are empowered to be able to make those decisions for themselves. Monitoring our DNF list, analyzing, I kind of mentioned this, our truancy data, looking at our restorative justice data, because Zach and Sarah keep information on that weekly. This has been kind of a new addition as well, monitoring our Go Guardian activity. So if you don't know, Go Guardian is basically our program that we use to monitor how kids are using their Chromebook, right? What are they looking at? What are they looking up? What's their search history? Those kinds of things. So we've been starting to dig a little bit into that, especially for students that are struggling academically. Is there a connection there in terms of how kids are using their time during the day? If they're on YouTube 5 hours of the school day, that's an issue, right? So that's been kind of an unexpected bonus in terms of another way that we're kind of measuring how are kids using their time, right? So couple things that I just kind of grabbed in terms of areas of growth, because I have been very transparent. I'm the first person to tell you this is not perfect yet. And we may not ever be perfect, but we are already in a much better spot right now than we were a year ago. So issues that we're still kind of working on and having a lot of discussions about as a staff. Encouraging students to use their flex time for its intended purpose, right? I'll say it again, we work in a building of 500 teenagers. I would love if every kid all the time used their flex time 100% the way it's intended. Does that happen? Nope, for sure not. So we work with kids on that, right? Ensuring that kids don't have too much flex time in their schedule and trying to find that balance regarding what do kids really need to be able to get done what they need to get done, access teachers during the day, and what ends up being almost too much flex time where then we start kind of navigating other issues, right? Constantly analyzing class placement on the master schedule so that it benefits all classes. I know Jess Wink is here. She has been the master schedule guru in terms of, I mean, it's one massive puzzle, right? So every semester that we build this, we're having really deep, rich conversations about, hey, we have to make sure that this class and this class don't overlap. Okay, if this and this overlap, that's probably okay. But these three, I mean, it's just trust me when I say it's a complicated dance in terms of trying to build that because we build it by hand. And by we, I mean really her. Builds it by hand every single semester, okay? I kind of mentioned, PLT, right now just trying to find a better process for monitoring that, ensuring that freshmen get the support that they need. I think we've made some good strides there, but we're probably not quite there yet. And frankly, transitioning from a traditional instructional delivery system to what we're trying to build because everything right now that we are trying to kind of untrain students from what they know, right? They've come all these years learning kind of the traditional system when we get here and we have to break some of those habits, right? And for teachers, this is hard too. We've been trained a certain way to teach. We've been trained a certain way to give assessments and kind of do school, right? And we're asking people to kind of throw a lot of that out the window. And change is hard. So next steps, okay, that should give you a cue that I'm almost done, okay? Next steps, so starting after Christmas break, we are going to be developing what's called Profile of an SHS Lifelong Learner. So basically what this is, we want to create a document, not quite a rubric necessarily, but a guide, if you will, of what we are going to guarantee that our graduates know and are able to do when they leave our system, which kind of hooks back to those learner outcomes, okay? So I've been talking with members of the chamber to get a meeting set up. I think we finally have a date set in February. We're going to sit with the chamber, just get some insight from them about as we release graduates into our community, what are some skills that you want to see? And I'm looking beyond just we want them to be on time, like that kind of, I get all that, right? I get all that. We're trying to go a little bit deeper to be basically a contributing member of the Somerset community in XYZ business. What skills are you looking for from kids, right? Also looking at developing a learning framework for student outcomes. So back to this question. How do we know what our students can demonstrate and what we can observe from our learners? So back to that learner outcome again, right? When students leave here, how do we know we've done our job, okay? And again, a lot of that is not super easily measurable, which is why this is a big task. Student shadowing. So I've got about 10 teachers that have volunteered to participate in a student shadowing exercise where we have students that will be matched up with teachers, and teachers will be shadowing a student for a day and taking down a whole bunch of information in terms of what does a typical day look like for a student within this system, right? How many transitions are happening? How much flex time does a student have? What does a conflict look like? I feel like we have some really good information from students, but we want to get more of a bird's eye view. So we have, as I said, about 10 teachers that will be going through that process, and we'll be drawing some conclusions and having some good discussions and writing some goals around what we see from that experience. We'll be releasing a survey to our 2019 graduates, asking them some questions about their experience at SHS overall. That is not necessarily specific to the FlexMod schedule because those graduates only lived it for a year, but there will be some questions there too. Again, just trying to get some relevant current data from the most recent graduates about did your experience at Somerset High School prepare you for whatever it was that you did next, okay? And then a FlexMod survey, we give this yearly, but we'll be doing that in February just to see how we can continuously improve the system, right? At this point, it's not a question of should the FlexMod stay or not. Like I can tell you our staff in our building, we're so far beyond that. It's really more about how do we make this schedule the best that it can be, Okay, so we want input from students and staff. And I've never surveyed the parents yet, so parents, if you're listening, it's coming. Okay? All right. So just some final thoughts that I want to throw out there since I have you kind of as a captivated audience here. These are things that I truly believe and I live every day that I'm in this building. I believe that we have higher expectations and more accountability for student learning now than we ever did in a traditional system. I think students would tell you that there's basically nowhere they can go without an adult ensuring that they are learning what we need them to learn. It's going to look different, it's going to sound different for a lot of kids. We don't ever expect that to be the same. But what we are requiring out of our kids to function in this system is way more than if we stayed with a traditional, stay in your class for 57 minutes until the bell rings, then move to the next class for 57 minutes, and then move to the next class for 57 minutes, right? This requires a much higher level of thinking and accountability. I want to throw this out there. Misconception. We have deadlines at the high school. There is no free-for-all in terms of you can turn in work whenever you want. That's not true, okay? Not true. Those listening at home, not true, okay? But here's the deal. When a student misses a deadline, okay, we don't give them a 0 because we believe giving a 0 lets a kid off the hook. And many kids would be more than happy to accept a 0 and not have to do the work. So we believe the consequence for not doing the work is doing the work, right? So if you're not going to do the work when it was expected to be done, then we have a whole bunch of other, see previous slides, ways that we're going to ensure that you do the work, okay? So might we get to a point, maybe the end of a semester, where if we haven't received any evidence of learning that a 0 has to go in there? Yep, maybe. And I'm okay with that. But in terms of going through the learning process, we spend much more time trying to figure out the why, right? Why didn't a student meet a deadline? Why didn't a student hit that mark, right? Because there's lots of reasons why. They didn't know how to do it, right? Maybe they were gone for a bunch of days. Maybe they have stuff going on at home. I listened to a couple weeks ago when you guys were having your discussion about the elementary construction, and I actually heard you talk about kind of your, I know, just it was good, your real world experience, because I hear that a lot, right? In the real world, there's deadlines. In the real world, you don't hit deadlines, you get fired, right? I don't buy that because I heard you talking about bidding and getting late bids. And I heard you say, we take late bids all the time because sometimes someone's email's down. Sometimes someone checks the wrong box, right? There's a lot of reasons why people don't hit deadlines, okay? My staff knows, yeah, you're already laughing, so you know what I'm going to say, right? Right? I know, right? We have this conversation a lot that I give them deadlines all the time, right? And they don't hit them all, but that's okay. None of you have been fired for it, right? But I ask why, right? And I spend way more energy about that than I do you missed the deadline. So, okay, the other piece I just want to hit on this really quickly is about redos and allowing kids to fix their mistakes. I want you to think about the last meeting when we had the academy students up here giving their presentation. And you remember Gunnar standing here, he was standing right here, so proud talking about his cutting boards that he was making. And you remember him saying, man, if you would have seen my first cutting board, whew, right? Well, if we would have graded Gunnar on his first cutting board, Gunnar would have received an F because it didn't meet any of the criteria of what a cutting board is supposed to look like. But now, after 5, 6, 7 attempts of going through learning how to make a cutting board, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. There you go, there's your A, awesome, right? We want kids to go through the process and understand you're going to make mistakes. Cool. We're going to let you fix those mistakes because our primary job is to validate your learning. That is our job as educators. Sometimes we can do that on the first try. Cool. But sometimes we need to allow kids to be able to show us their learning in a variety of ways after maybe the second or third time as well. Okay? The other thing I want to mention, then I swear I'm almost done, I'm really proud that at this point now, as of Wednesday, which was number 15, I've had over 15 schools contact me asking questions about what are you doing? In a good way, right? Let me preface that. In a good way. What are you doing, right? Like asking how did you do that? Asking how did you get staff to buy in, which is a great question because I didn't do that. We bought in together, right? How does it look like? What about parents? Can you send me these documents? We've had 2 site visits so far, right? So I'm proud of the fact that people are on the outside looking in saying, I would love to do that, which is what I just had a principal tell me and said we never could. We never could because of XYZ. Okay? I'm proud of the fact that we're doing something that I believe is best for kids. And I know you've heard me say this, I'm really passionate about the fact that I think this is the work for kids in 2019. So, and these guys will tell you, okay, that this has not been an easy journey. This has not been sunshine and rainbows every second, believe me, right? We still have a lot of meetings as a staff talking about the best direction to go within the system. As I said, the conversations no longer are, should we go back to a 6-period day, 7-period day, 8-period day? Like, we're way beyond that. But this is hard. It's hard work. And it's hard work to help people understand the why behind what we're doing, because it looks and sounds different. They'll tell you it's hard. It's still hard. But we believe in what we're doing. I believe in what we're doing. And you're still with me. Perfect. Okay. So I'm happy to ask questions if you could possibly get a word in edgewise after all that. So.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, great job. I got a list of questions, but I'm not gonna take up more time here. You
Okay.
answered a lot of them as we went too. Thank you. And did anyone else have questions for her? I really appreciate your time, Shannon. Thank you
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much.
Yes.
All right then, we're gonna scoot on to the consent agenda. And just remembering that we are not doing 7A1 and 7A3. Does anyone want to make any motions?
I'll make a motion to approve the rest of them in A through F.
I'll second.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Lori. So if anyone has any questions on the rest of those? If not, then I'm gonna say all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, that was quick, fast, and efficient. Let's go on to item 8, which would be 7A1 and the old 7A1 and the old 7A3.
Okay, just briefly, the October 21st minutes that were attached are exactly the same as the ones I first started out. There hasn't, and the board gave direction. Because I had asked, I mean, I don't want to repeat it all again, because this is like the third time I've talked about this. So I don't know how those are going to get changed. Was I expected to make the changes?
I don't know what changes you want, and I watched the meeting and I watched the board meeting, so.
That's why I was not under the impression that I was given any direction. I thought it was moving forward, so I did not make any changes when I added them to this agenda.
So we had, in our December 2nd meeting, then we talked about everything that's on an agenda should say what happened to it. And there were things listed on the agenda from October 21st that had no direction. And, I mean, I will write them up myself if you want me to do that, but I thought you'd prefer just me not doing that, but I will be happy to go back and look through that. And then on December 2nd meeting minutes, there was no mention of the board direction regarding the minutes or our public comments discussion. And I think those need to be on there because we gave direction. And there's no record of it. I mean, it just, yeah.
Okay, you're saying the board gave direction. Granted, I was not physically here. I did not hear a motion by the board to amend it to include going back to October 21st. So if that is what you're suggesting here, what you're asking for is to have the agenda from October 21st, go back to that agenda and actually put something to each of the agenda items? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
And are the rest of you all okay with that?
What specifically are we looking for, Katie? I mean, that would help, I feel.
It's not that difficult. It was how our minutes used to be, and
You
then
said there's
they've
things that are
changed.
missing.
Yes.
Or not elaborated on, or.
Okay,
some,
so, well, now I'd
missing.
have to go back to
What?
well, I had sent an email just saying, please add our discussion about the employee council. and,
Okay, so.
and our once around the table topics that have been discussed. Since subsequent to the email that I sent, there was another one or two items that Mark had listed under his superintendent's report. And these things were always included in the past. And it'll be very difficult to go back and find stuff. I just want clearer minutes.
But you want us to go back and redo
The
October 21st?
ones that I've objected to since October 23rd.
So if you have something you specifically want in there from the employee council, my suggestion would be to write it out. If you want something very specific in there, write it out so that it's attached to it.
I never said I wanted anything specific. Because I knew that would be a problem. So I was just saying, do it the way you do your other minutes, which are, the board discussed.
Board discussed employee council,
Well,
is that what you want on
no,
there?
I mean, why am I don't understand why I'm being given a hard time. Nothing has changed. And even
Well-
though the board gave direction, nothing has changed.
One thing has changed.
I just
Taylor-
need clearer direction, and
and she
whatever
went
the
to-
board wants to do, I'm happy to do it, but I need clear direction to do so.
And she went to a training that is very much the same as the training I went to, that seems to be very different than your perception of what you would like to see in the minutes. And so I would ask the entire board, I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from October 21st, 2019 as presented. And if there's an addition to be made, then Katie can submit that and we can attach it to those minutes. Because
I don't
I think
endorse
we're
them.
leaving her in the black without knowing what to do.
And I don't endorse them, so I would like permission to follow up on that with legal counsel because at this point, I mean, this should have been an easy thing. This should have been,
In your eyes. So I've got a motion on the table for the minutes of October 21st
Still,
as
it's not
presented.
clear what you want
I don't-
included.
I don't
and
either.
So we can put this to bed once and for all. What,
the
What do we want
topics
to say?
that are listed on the agenda that let's bring up,
The October 21st agenda?
no,
Meeting minutes?
that's like maybe November 18th, I don't know, I haven't looked at them.
Well, I don't wanna look at November 18th, let's look
No,
at
no, no, no,
October
because
21st,
I'm
because
gonna-
that's the one that's in question right now. So I don't know why we don't look at that one and what we're supposed to add to these.
Because the ones that I'm saying are missing things are the ones that we're talking about. So if you want me to come back with the exact language, I will. But we're missing important topics of discussion, including on December 2nd, when the board said, and Catherine, you led the meeting. Nope, there wasn't a formal motion made, I don't believe, but I think you went around the table. And after a lengthy discussion about the meeting minutes issue, you said, we all basically agreed that anything that was itemized in, an agenda should have a subsequent description of what happened.
My recollection is that you were kind of coming up with a hybrid that was still within the framework of your training, but had a little bit more detail so that everybody was pretty clear on that. That was what I remember.
I thought it was also to meet open record laws, because we need to have both of those things in it for open record laws in public meetings.
Right, and so her training, hopefully she can come up with a format that will cover all of that.
But it's.
I'm not trained in taking minutes.
Well, in the policy, isn't the policy, I don't know which one of those, but.
Yeah.
Isn't that the one that says, if requested, right,
Mm-hmm.
the last line was, if requested, it would have additional information, so because the minutes said, you only put a topic on there if there's a motion, unless, if requested, additional information, so we said every topic was gonna at least have something.
We did say
On
that.
there.
I mean,
And
that
that's
Which
was,
was-
policy 168.
But it says that right in the policy, so I don't know why we'd have to add it in here if it already says it in the policy that if requested, and it was requested, so
So,
which I think this one has everything.
and in my
Yeah.
head, I just think, and so we also talked about public comment at all meetings. And so this was another discussion that we had and how we're interpreting that and, you know, and the board was specific and that needs to be reflected in the minutes.
But again,
These are not minor things.
but I'll go back to, again, in the policy for the open forum, public comment, it said it'll be at all meetings. So there was nothing that needed to change when it already says in the
I'm not saying
policy.
it needed to
that's-
change.
Well,
I'm-
why would we have to add anything to the minutes when the policy already says?
I think it's
Public
important
comment
that
is that-
Peter, you're
all
saying that you
meetings.
want something added to the minutes is what I'm understanding. So it'd be easiest for me if we open up this October 21st minutes, you guys come to a conclusion on what wants to be added and we move forward with that. Cause I don't think it's being understood what you're asking. And so I'm just trying to clarify that. There's language that you want added to the October 21st meeting minutes. And it has not been added because I don't feel like I was given clear direction.
And watch the video again, because as I said, when I sent you the email back on like October 25th,
Mhm.
I mentioned a couple things that had just been fresh on my mind.
Yep.
And, but have since noted that there was another item on that agenda from October 21st. So I need to go back and review it. All I'm saying is there needs to be consistency, and I thought the board kind of directed some of that consistency, but it's not reflected in the December 2nd, and so clearly we were.
So what's not reflective in December 2nd? Can we go through that?
That's what I just said.
Our conversation about,
So can we add that? That's what I'm asking right
Right,
now,
yeah.
so it can just.
Yeah, please, I would be fine
Is
with
that
it.
a policy review item? We have-
that was one of
The
them.
board will
one of
have
them
open
that's not-
comment on every meeting. As it states in the policy listed above. I don't know, I'm just,
This should have been a very easy.
It is very easy because
Yeah.
we're able to add and say, hey, let's add these things in the minutes, and this is the appropriate time to do it.
So what
It's
do we
simple.
wanna add?
It is very simple. It's just can we add a discussion piece in there, and that's awesome. So, okay, what do we wanna add?
I have to go back and compare the minutes to the agenda, but I know that there were specific conversations about policies. For example, we talked about policy 6,000 something about the employee expense. And I was surprised, I sent an email to Marie and Mark because we had a first reading at the work session on December 2nd. So the normal procedure is that it comes back to a regular session.
Once it's approved, once we worked on it, but we didn't even work on it. You guys brought it to our attention on the first, so I wouldn't say that you were
It was a
asking or
first
suggesting
reading
it.
on the December 2nd. And normally, the regular procedure is you have a first reading at the work session, and then you have a second reading, and it's up for a vote at the regular session. That's typically how we've been doing policies.
If there are policies that are in place, but this was a brand new one, so I thought we should take it to the work session to actually look at what you were suggesting on it. That was my fault then. I misunderstood how you wanted that policy to get put into
Well,
action.
Marie, I would disagree that we haven't done that with new policies in the past,
But
because
have they
we
been new
have.
policies?
Some of them have, yes.
Then
And
I'm sorry, that's my fault.
this policy, I had brought it up 2 times at previous meetings before it was brought for a first reading at the December meeting. So this was actually the 3rd time it had been talked about. It was the first time that the written document
And
was,
that's what I was going off of, and that's my misunderstanding. I take the blame for that.
So can I make a suggestion about the meeting minutes and perhaps the board will approve? Can I just work with Tasia just so that we can
To
get
redo
an,
those
as
three?
the clerk, yes, just to throw this,
And then
throw
bring
it
them
out
back
there in
for
the
approval.
January.
that
Yeah.
seems
Bring them
reasonable.
And going forward,
To approve.
something that, yeah,
yes.
Thank you.
So are we clear on our direction? That Katie is going to work with Tasia on the October 21st and December 2nd minutes, and then they will be brought back to the board. Would you like them
In
brought
January,
at the work session?
yes,
Will we be ready by then?
at the board meeting.
The regular session?
Well, I have a sometime, but I don't know
So
what
we
your
have to.
schedule is.
So when will
January
they come
meeting?
back?
Second.
The January board meeting,
Regular session?
yes,
Second.
Okay.
thank you.
So
Okay, are we good
Do the
with that?
minutes need to say that? So that should be in the minutes. and
I'm writing them in the
language
minutes right
that
this
Lori just
second.
said.
Thank you. All right, so we've got item 8, Katie will work with Tasia to get those minutes as she's comfortable, and then we will be able to vote on those on the January regular session.
Thank you.
Would you, do we need a motion?
No,
We need to
well,
make a motion to either accept them or table them. 'cause it's
oh,
on
can
the
I
agenda.
table them? Sorry about that, you're right.
I had a motion from Marie, I don't think it was ever seconded.
No, it wasn't, that was
Oh,
Joe.
I. So, do you want to make a motion to table,
Did it die?
for lack of a second, yeah?
Okay, yes, I'll move to, include the October 21st and
December.
December 2nd minutes on the January, board
Will be tabled to the January
board
regular
session.
session.
I'll second.
Sorry.
Okay, so we have a motion and made by Katie to table the October 21st and December 2nd minutes, approval of minutes, seconded by Lori, to move them to the January regular session. I don't have that date right now.
27th.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Sorry, missing it right below it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. All right, so then we are on to general information. Our January meeting dates, the 6th and the 27th. And then we have a once around the table. So are you okay then still bringing that policy to the work session in January?
Yes.
Great.
All of those policies again? The whole?
The only one that the policy committee had worked on was the 6,000 one. I don't remember the number off the top of my head.
The expense one.
Yes, expense reimbursement.
So Tasia, if you have others that we need to work on, though, those should also, so we can keep it moving forward. So, once we're on the table, anybody want to start? Bob?
Sure. Can we get a update on the summer school situation for next year, Mark? Just, I know it's
Meeting tomorrow.
winter, but summer will be here.
What's that?
I know it's winter, but summer will be here.
Yeah,
snap
and
it,
there's, yeah,
Just so we
we're
have
actually
some
having another meeting
transparency.
tomorrow, so.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then I will not be here, January 6th.
Okay. Sorry, getting down. Patty Jo?
I just want to say we appreciated the summers that at the school store that they put out for the kids
At the elementary.
at the elementary school. My son got $5 and he bought himself 5 things for his siblings that he quickly took from them after gifting them. And it's just been great, so really good.
I don't have anything. Nothing, Catherine, all right. And Lori?
A while back, I had asked about a report from the workers' comp insurance, if there was a year-end report that could be shared.
I think I've already responded to that, but there isn't a level of detail, I think, that they will provide that I think we wanna see because of the data privacy of it. Nor Jody is, we talked about this before, and, let me go, I'll have to get back with her and see.
Okay.
But I just don't think that some of the things that we wanna find out, we can't share, just because of data privacy. But I have to revisit it.
motion to adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 1985 1C to consider the performance evaluation of the district administrator. Anyone willing to make that motion for me? Thank you, Patty Jo. Anyone making a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for coming this evening, people. Oh, sure.
Marie, you gotta do a roll call vote.
Bruce,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
myself, yes, Bob,
Yes.
Patty Jo, Catherine,
Yes.
and Lori?
Yes.
All right. So we're into closed session. I'm sorry.